we need to start thinking about ourselves beyond the jobs that we have today and the notion of a career, and start thinking about how I creating passive annuities for myself that generate value. And that really rests upon my own credibility. So I have to start constructing a narrative around my own credibility that has direct compensation opportunities. People on YouTube have already been living in the future for the last 7 or 8 years, right? We're just kind of catching up, and the rest of the world needs a fundamentally different methodology and modality to do that.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of CTO Confidential. I am here with Dan Pratl of Quadron. And Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. So why don't you, for those, you were on my co-founder Justin's show
Mhm.
earlier this week. For everyone who hasn't seen that, why don't you give us a quick rundown of Quadron, what it is and what you do?
Yeah, so Quadron is a big bet on verification infrastructure in the AI era. And that's kind of fuzzy. What that really means is that in a super abundant information environment where everything looks the same, how can you discern quality? Well, it's our bet that humans are going to be integral to that. So we're building verification infrastructure around human beings. Deeper kind of angle on that, take on that is expertise really matters now more than ever. So reputational infrastructure that compounds along the course of your career and builds with you and is sovereign to you is absolutely critical, not only for you telling your own story, but the organizations that may want to work with you throughout your career.
Amazing, amazing. So this is so interesting because I want to say 5 years ago or so, um, even maybe even before that, I had this thought that AI would somehow save us by virtue of kind of ruining authenticity. And what I mean by that is we were going through an era where people were like, I don't know, like there's all this like the news kind of went from like to a very op-ed. It was kind of on this path, but I feel like there, you go back to like the age of yellow journalism, and I felt like the
Mhm.
internet was
Yeah.
kind of bringing this back, where everything was an op-ed. There was no like real, just straight factual reporting. How I would imagine like a Walter Cronkite kind of era, right? It's not like that. It was on this road. Then there was all this like images of people coming up from the past, and look, this person did this horrible thing, so they must be horrible now.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, as soon as we can't trust, and like generations past didn't deal with that. My
Hmm.
generation, millennial forward, the age of social media, basically everything you ever did was living forever. And you everybody had a friend who was like trying to get on the police force, and they combed their social media and like saw them drinking in high school, and now they can't do it
Yeah.
anymore, something like that. And I thought, you know what, the idea that like you would get your like the ability to kind of like remove your history, that the other generations just had that. We kind of had this like everything lives forever, but we also have this general mistrust as things like the New York Times and other publications, the subscriptions are notoriously low. So my thinking around this was always that, well, when you couldn't trust everything, you would actually have to return to trusted sources. You might
Hmm.
actually pay for a subscription to Financial Times because you want to. There's like a there's something to be said for that. And then, of course, the idea that maybe your past might not follow you everywhere because it's like, hey, we can't actually go through like this person's social media when they were 13, 14, 15 years old and not give them a job at 29 because of something they did when they were 15.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've definitely entered the era where everyone has something from their background that's going to make them have egg on their face, right? Embarrass them just a little bit. And we all kind of hide out in the open now. And I think, there's a lot to be said for every information technology revolution throughout history creates this kind of reframe of what is and is not valuable, what is and is not important, both to us personally as well as societally. I think we're all hiding out in the open in this day and age. And if you think about media over the last 30 years, it unbundled because of the velocity of information, and it recompiled itself into things like Wikipedia, like Reddit, these networks of communities that, not only self-organize, but they self-evaluate and they discern what is and is not critical. Rockstar journalists are super important in that, which is why New York Times and the Atlantic and the rest of them continue to hire the big names. But all of that still resides on social proof, right? And I think that's the deeper problem is that all of our systems for discerning value are basically totems of competence at base, right? They're prestige networks. Um, when it comes to making money off of who we are in the future, it's our big bet that we need a little bit more information, a little bit more quantifiable information about everybody around us. Um, so before I jump into it, Mike, I wanted to return it back to you. You had a couple of questions for me before we got started, and maybe we can go and kind of go in that direction on the technical side.
Yeah, yeah, that was exactly right. So I know that you have a law degree and you worked at the SEC, and you were talking a little bit how you were around for the Kubernetes revolution and kind of this like hollowing out of open source. So I'd love to take it back to in that direction. Let's go back to your origin story because maybe that'll give everybody the kind of timeline of why this is like so interesting to you now.
Yeah, appreciate that. So, yeah, Great Recession, came out of law school, very different world, didn't know what I wanted to be doing, but was fascinated by markets. Um, Began in enforcement at the SEC very briefly. Got to see a system, in my personal opinion, that wasn't doing what it was supposed to. We had the opportunity to go after the big banks. We were doing selling away arrangements, tax evasion for very small dollars. Left a bit disenchanted, went into open source of all things. I thought it was very like this was the height of social coding. GitHub was still the hot, sexy new concept, and got to see the notion of like a guy sitting on his couch and taking on an 800-pound gorilla, one of the hyperscalers before hyperscalers were called that, was always cool to me. And being a part of Progress was my reason for joining. Got to see open source move from the bazaar. You remember the bazaar and the cathedral, and got to move from that era to more being captured by monopolistic activity, right? And that was absolutely around like when Docker came out and containerization was this new and sexy thing. And then you got to see this beast called Kubernetes take over, be funded incredibly well, and got to see everything else kind of wither on the vine. And that's just the nature of any community with mechanisms that don't have incentives baked in. And I think the deeper point there, and the thing that stayed with me, is the lack of a remunerative structure, compensation, direct compensation for maintaining repos. We all laugh about the Nebraska problem, but it's very real. Modern digital infrastructure resides on obligation or fascination, and that's not durable. The system was built by people that remember the Unix and what Xerox did with the proprietary code, but we live in a world now that those days are long past. Those individuals have aged out. And I got to see what happens as a consequence of that when large companies start using it without contributing back.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a very interesting because that was as I became a programmer. So it's so interesting to hear your story because I graduated college in 2008 and considered law school. So you were probably just coming out of law school. I
Yeah.
considered it. And I
Yeah.
remember standing online at the Barnes and Noble with like the LSAT book, and this
Oh,
guy's like, "You
Jesus.
want to be a lawyer?" And I was like, "I think so." And he's like, I was like, "What do you do?" And he goes, because I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point. I just graduated college
Mhm.
and I had this
Yeah.
degree in geography, and I thought, and there were no jobs, so I thought, let me just go back to school.
Hmm.
And he goes, "I'm a lawyer." I go, "You like it?" He goes, "I hate it."
Hmm.
And I
That is a
still bought
common
the book.
refrain, man. Yeah, 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 yeah. See, you
I
said
still
LSAT,
bought.
my eye is twitching now. So thank
Oh
you for
yeah.
that,
Oh my
for the
god.
PTSD. Yeah, yeah,
It was like it was so funny that one I bought the book, but that left such a impression. Just this one person, the way that he said it made me realize because I had taken like some constitutional law classes and I really enjoyed them in like
yeah. They're great.
undergrad.
That's a lot of fun.
And
Yeah,
but
that's
I
a good
said
area.
I'm probably not going to clerk for a Supreme Court justice. I'm
Right.
probably going
Yep.
to end up ambulance chasing or doing real estate or like so that was like there's like this gulf between what the reality is. And so I ended up in
Hmm.
programming, long story, I ended up in engineering. Um but open source around the time when I was getting into it was very like you said, it was sort of the bizarre. And then it started down this path and a lot of the open source we use now,
Hmm.
admittedly, like React, for example, is corporate funded. Really, it's open source that came out of these behemoths, include Kubernetes being another one. They sort of take over the ecosystem, and that can be good or bad. I don't know which way to go sometimes because there are great stories like Vue.js being one of them,
Yep.
and I think Tailwind is another amazing
Hmm.
one, and Bun that had no corporate sponsorship that really just kind of were built by these solo devs, but admittedly they have trouble earning, well, not Bun anymore. They got bought by
Yeah,
Anthropic, so they're fine. but
they're doing well.
Tailwind,
They're okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Just don't leave any
he's the
security policies open late at night or code anything late at night. Yeah, anyway, yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's the darling of the but Tailwind I think is a great example where they just had to do some layoffs, and
Hmm.
it has been a struggle, even though it's this thing that we're all using. Almost nobody is like at least contributing back in terms of dollars, even if it's not in the into the code base.
Yeah, it's the inevitability of any system where the individuals who felt the pain of the past era are no longer there. They built a great development methodology, the all the eyes, coming to a problem, the problem's quite shallow. But they didn't think about the consequences when those individuals need to pay their mortgage. And that's the reality of just life around us is if you don't have systems where every layer, including incentives, are programmed, and shitification, excuse my French, is going to happen. It's just an inevitability. There's I was talking to my CTO the other day about the notion of healthy anemia. This that things should die, things that shouldn't exist should struggle. That is a good and healthy. That's the cycle of circle of life, nature, whatever you want to call it. And that, as you describe it, was very much the early aughts. Late 2008, 2009, early aughts. That was very much active and robust. And now we're at a point where I think it was Block came out with a white paper written by a dear friend that is at the open source, I think it's open source initiative. Anyway, that basically said the best we can do is subsidies, grants, and that's how this is going to run into perpetuity. AI be damned, and it feels a little bit toothless, like we can't do any better. And I don't know. That's one of the my experiences and one of my motivations that no, we can absolutely do better. It's just not going to come from a Google or a Microsoft. It's going to have to be bottoms up. I think that not only is that kind of the inevitability, because the criticality of human beings doing the verification is central, if we want a development community that actually can remember why the hell it did something in the first place, we have to start compensation from the ground up, and that begins with recognition.
That's right. That's right. And I think that that's another brings in another good point. Like AI has started. A lot of open source maintainers have complained about this online. Is you're getting just endless contributions now, so it's almost the
Hmm.
reverse where everybody's contributing by virtue of agent everything they ever could have wanted, and it's turning into like an enshittification, so to speak,
Yeah,
of the scenario.
exactly.
They're almost like we actually kind of have to close off contributions now. We don't want people to contribute, and we actually want you to contribute. Not it's not if you don't use AI, but AI is never going to come up with kind of the novel solution. It can like kind of help you, but the
Yeah,
humans are still very much kind of
right.
driving these new idioms and the syntax and the creativity around the whole thing. And I think if you've used the AI for any period of time, you'll realize that it's really really good at repeatable known patterns. And when you try and get it to do something new, usually you have to kind of work with it. And I think that's Taylor Otwell talked about this. You feel the code almost pushing back on you, and you only learn that through the hand coding process and kind of putting your fingers in the clay, so to speak, and understanding this. So I'm very curious now. Your new product, how would that relate to open source? Kind of tie it together for me now. Like what is your new product going to do that kind of enables more like human kind of vouching?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great segue into it. So it's a reconceptualization or a new systems architecture for verification of the things that we used to take for granted. So we'll just use open source. I understand where we're at right now and who I'm
Yeah.
talking to. But when you give somebody an easy button, they don't go through the hazing process to appreciate, to have taste, to have judgment, that last mile critical thing. We've got to build an incentive structure for people to appreciate why hazing was there in the first place. Hazing wasn't there, pulling your underwear above your head wasn't there to make you feel bad. It was to make you learn judgment and wisdom and expertise, right? And now, admittedly, telling somebody to never use AI is not a viable proposition. I've spoken to many CIOs that have tried to do that. It's never going to work. That horse has left the barn. What you need to do, excuse me, what you need to do is re-architect the system to think about incentives. And that means money. That means reputational, bolstering the reputation. That means doing both at the same time, rewarding expertise and judgment. And it can't be social proof. It can't just be stars on GitHub. It can't just be, the loudest mouth on social media. You've got to build a system that does two things. First off, it gives organizations more of what they need, which is not more noise, but more signal, which requires curation and expertise. And you've got to incentivize individuals to do that curation because last time I checked, we're not making a judgment machine anytime soon. Wisdom is incredibly hard to replace, and creativity is incredibly hard to replace. So for the foreseeable future, excuse me, it's going to be cheaper to incentivize experts than it is to create the wisdom machine, right? So yeah, so what we're doing at Quadron, long-winded way, and my apologies, is building the systems architecture to create the incentive structure to give people more of what they need. Organizations get curated signal, individuals get the incentives to do that, and then the proof of contribution and portable proof of contribution that travels with them and accretes over the course of their career. It allows them to be rewarded directly for being experts.
Oh, very, very cool. So yeah, it's almost like something that I had always been very interested in is like the idea of a union for software engineers. And the
Hmm.
idea like when you join an
Yep.
electrician's union, you are an apprentice and you're a journeyman. Now we've always kind of relied on like, oh, I was ex Google or ex
Yeah. Yep.
Amazon and
Yep. Yep.
and
Yep.
I went to this degree program, but
Hmm.
really that doesn't capture it because I've worked with great people who have like just been basically mercenaries
Yeah.
their whole career, like the hired guns, and they're amazing engineers. They just weren't able to do that at those places. And I always thought that it'd be interesting if there was a more union type system, because the other thing that I think about with AI is it allows people to skip learning in a lot of
Hmm.
ways or feign
Right.
learning. And you won't realize that that wisdom isn't there for quite some time. So, like, if somebody starts a new job, you could probably get by for a very long time, like in a very fake it till you'll make it way for a
Hmm.
really long time until you hit that real critical scenario where you're like, or like a scenario where like the AI happens to not be working and there's like and it's like, oh, wait, Claude is down at the same time that I'm trying to fix a critical system. And so I got to rely on some expertise.
Funny you mentioned that. I was talking to somebody that deals with policy in Hong Kong recently, and really nice guy, really sweet guy. And he said, my biggest fear is that we're in a moment of like where Enron is going to happen, right? And we don't see it, and it's going to be a five-alarm fire, and the individuals who are supposed to be at the wheel turn out not to have the credentials to actually right the ship. Sorry, mixed metaphors there, but to
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get us back on track, and that keeps them up at night. And that's it's very much on the horizon. I'm not going to say it's an inevitability, but it's you can foresee it.
Well, I think one of the things that happened when AI first hit, one of and you have some crypto background, so this is going to
Hmm.
take us back into there because Web3 was huge when Justin and I had first gone full time as an agency. And we had always done like websites and software. And then Web3 was becoming a thing. And we were starting to say, like, maybe this is the future. We got to start pivoting our marketing materials around Web3. We did some NFT launches. We were learning some of it. And
Hmm.
one of the interesting things is my expertise told me, like, very, like, especially with the NFT thing, I was like, I felt like the most imposter syndrome I've ever felt in my life was telling people that I
Yeah.
just did not get NFTs, and not from a
Yep.
technical perspective, just from like they're like, but you get to own this digital art. And I was like, I don't get why I can't just download it as a JPEG and make it in the back. Like
Yep.
I was like, I'm sorry, I just
Yep.
don't get it, and I felt like such a Warren Buffett, like I was like, I don't invest. Long story short, Web3 blows up and goes
Hmm.
away because of I kind of blame the whole thing on Sam Bankman-Fried. It was basically like it was on this rise, and then FTX found out to be like basically fraudulent for everything. And suddenly we were like, okay, I said, thank God we didn't pivot to being a Web3 agency, because all of a sudden we needed to rely on our software
Right.
contracts. All the Web3
Right.
stuff was done. No, there were no more play to earns. It was like the whole world was like, wait, it's a Ponzi scheme. And they all just said it all at once. And
Yeah. And
so
yeah.
yeah.
No, I'm
I
sorry. Go ahead,
worry
Mike.
about that with AI. That was my, when AI first came out, I said, we haven't seen it yet, but there's a lesson in history here that, not that it's going to explode and be useless, but there will be a big there will be something like that. And I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on this. That on
Yeah,
going back
man.
to
I am Mike. I'm going to try not to ramble because you got me enthusiastic, and I'm excited about this one. I think the hallmark of enshittification is when individuals that kind of sit at the intersection of like the canon holders, the ones that have religion, and are like, and the newbies that are coming in, is that the ones that still kind of sit astride both start reveling in the arcane. Right? They really double down on the wizardry that keeps them in the in group and others in the out group, right? You saw that in open source. You know, the graybeards absolutely started doing that right around the Kubernetes era. And arguably, they're still doing that. And in crypto, you see, if you go and I love the crypto guys. I actually think there's a lot of goodness there. And I think, well, it'll find fundamentals and it'll actually be utilized outside of stable coins and payment rails and the stuff that it is presiding today. But if you hear them talk on those podcasts, it's jargon, man. You can't, it's incredibly difficult to discern what the hell it is they're talking about. And that's because the in group has become a little bit more insular than it used to be in the past. When it was expanding horizons, better tomorrow, the language the language was incredibly inclusive, right? You want people to have those tokens. You want people to maintain that inflationary environment. It's really not the situation today. So you see this, excuse me, I'm dying over here. You see this
oh,
return to fundamentals, but not in a helpful way, in a more insular way, and it makes it more difficult. And I think that's actually kind of counter to what they should be doing at this point in time.
totally, totally. Like that was you bring up such a good point. Like the insular, but also these like weird stories. So, for instance, in the crypto era, there was all these stories about look at this young millionaire, look at this young millionaire, look at this.
Yeah.
They did nothing except bet their
Yep.
whole future and won.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, but I know a lot of people who are invested
Hmm.
in crypto. I don't know anybody who got rich off crypto. I said I see them online, but in terms of
Hmm.
people whose hands I could shake, I don't know anyone that just like put their whole paycheck on Bitcoin and it just, I
Hmm.
said I know a lot of people that did that, did it on a different coin and lost everything. Like, so I always say that behavior is
Yeah.
there. Like I said, the behavior that won you that money is the same behavior that's going to lose you all that money because you're
Yes.
going to take a risk on something silly.
Yeah, and what's funny is we've seen this episode before. This happens every time there's a technological revolution that has an ability to speculate. Infinite margin led to 29, right? Like we've seen this episode before. It happens every time. The idea here is now, sorry, bringing it back to me, making it about me now,
Yeah.
Mike, is that we can program every layer of the stack. Every layer of the stack is now a computer, right? Including incentives. You don't have to rely on, people finding religion, getting your token and believing in a better tomorrow to actually
Mm-hmm.
create progress. We can actually program the right thing being you and your reputation and making you consider your reputation. We can program that and to have you start thinking long term. And that's really what Quadron's trying to do. It reflects my understanding of the world, which is my grandfather and my great grandfather had pensions. My father and I have a 401k. We need to start thinking about ourselves beyond the jobs that we have today and the notion of a career, and start thinking about how I start how creating passive annuities for myself that generate value, and that really rests upon my own credibility. So I have to
Mm-hmm.
constructing a narrative around my own credibility that has direct compensation opportunities. People on YouTube have already been living in the future for the last 7 or 8 years, right? We're just kind of
Right.
catching up, and the rest of the world needs a fundamentally different methodology and modality to do that sort of thing.
That's very true. That's a big one of the big motivations behind Justin and I building the YouTube channel was we were like, hey, how are we going to like insulate ourselves? Because before a lot of it was like admittedly open source contributions were something that a developer could
Yeah,
lean on or past
yeah,
employment.
yeah.
Now not so much, and it's a very different world. And we always thought, all right, build the YouTube channel, that's your credibility. But not everybody can do that. I have a massive appreciation for 401ks and pensions, which were things that my parents had encouraged me to do. My dad was a cop, my mom was a nurse. They were always like,
Yeah.
get a job, get a pension. I go, no, I'm going to go work for this startup and they're going to go to the moon. And none of them went to the moon. So like that's,
Hmm. Hmm.
and there it is. Like thankfully I put some money away. So now back to your product though, like how does a developer like myself starting out, how would they use your product to start building that like their expertise over time? How does it work?
Yeah, so we're still in beta. I'm coming out to talk about it because the systems are in place, and now we need to start getting the vocabulary and education out there because this is such a seismic change in the way you think about the value of you in the world. So if say if you're a developer, right, you commit something to GitHub, and that information in GitHub does not actually it operates much like academia, right? Was it utilized? Do people like it? It still is a gossip network that relies on prestige. Those can be hacked, right? It's very easy to make number go up, right? There is no way to actually confront with conviction on your end whether you believe you are right to contextualize your code against some activity in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Code on its own is really not that valuable anymore. It's the contextualization of that code in real world conditions. And that's where speculation comes in. So we're actually building credibility markets. It's bet on yourself, prove it. You believe something, but you're going to have to show that what you believe in a real world condition. We're still developing this. We're starting in healthcare and academia because the structure's already there. On the
Right.
development side, it's very obvious that you can have a heartbleed, right? And you can have an individual that says, I think this is an open issue and we should probably resolve it. We already have bounty programs, right? But imagine if the bounty programs were atomized to individuals who can actually articulate what it is the hell that they're talking about, right? So you narrow the aperture from the entire world in a bounty program, just hoping that somebody finds it. And you can say, Mike, you and four other people have a background that are likely to result to be seeking for issues like this. I'd really like to incentivize you in particular. And I'd like for you to put up your resolution in the next 24 hours, the next 72 hours. So you can have this symmetrical approach to you can not only create bounties, but you yourself can start pitching to the world that you think there is a problem, and other individuals that have a high degree of conviction can either agree with you or take the other side. Because I think there's an old Talib quote, which is like, don't show me what's in your portfolio. Excuse me, don't tell me what you believe, show me what's in your portfolio. It's the exact same thing here, right? If you think there's a problem, back it up. Don't go on social media. Go out and actually try to be a vector for progress by putting your name behind it. And that's really how you're going to build credibility rapidly in the modern.
Very cool. And so then basically, I would get credit on like your platform in your infrastructure for discovering that. Like like we always talk about, Michael Blurry predicted the last recession.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of thing. And then maybe I could just see that he's always saying recession, so it's not really a prediction.
And that is actually something funny. I have a screenshot of like somebody saying the same thing over and over and over again, and eventually, the blind squirrel finds the nut. Like that's a problem in itself because then that is the boy who cried wolf, and nobody listens to the person. There is a signal in an individual saying the same thing and being right, and that's a negative signal. And there's also a signal in an individual saying the same thing and then changing their tune because maybe they do know
Right.
something, right? And like we don't have a mechanism to create the incentive for people to actually stake with conviction, so to speak, right? We have the ability to stake, but to what end we don't currently have.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I guess with like with doctors in medical, I guess if you were a surgeon, you'd have a similar like, hey, this person had this thing, this was the outcome.
Mhm.
So you have a very clear like a clear rapport there. And I
Yeah.
think they have some systems for that now where you can see like a doctor's outcomes.
That's one thing that thanks for touching on that. That's the question I get a lot is like, okay, the world doesn't play out like a football game. It doesn't play out like an election where there's an easily resolvable outcome. There's a binary. Did you win? Did you not win? That's why prediction markets work so well. And my response is like, you're absolutely right. That's why you need agents to structure and resolve these with binaries that the system in itself creates around your work, right?
Right.
So you actually this doesn't work without AI and agents working semi-autonomously to find angles and to find points of friction and to bring people together to create markets. Because markets, in my personal opinion, are going to materially change. Much like media unbundled, I think markets are going to unbundle, become incredibly personal. It's going to look a little bit more like Reddit and a lot
Mm.
less like a place that you go eat via your phone, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, yeah, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, because I'm even thinking about, you could almost stack the deck in your favor in some ways too, which like For example, if I'm a doctor, I might take on very easy surgeries so that I have like a
Hmm.
perfect
Yes.
score. But like that would not make me as valuable. Let's say this doctor did have a number of losses, but they took on very difficult brain surgeries. Like that could be a better signal for like, hey, it's not that this person is bad because their statistical outcome isn't right. They're literally taking on surgeries that nobody else would take on and having better outcomes than were expected, or somewhat better.
And exactly that. Once you allow conviction and speculation and conviction to enter, you start getting step changes in behaviors. People start caring in a different way than they did prior, and that has broad implications on things like insurance. Right? Right now, we're in vast pools, and people are largely treated the same. Medical insurance is hugely expensive. It drives a certain behavior in doctors that they will and will not go and do certain things. If the incentives change, it's highly likely that there's an opportunity to not only change the behaviors, but also change the way that things like insurance actually get meted out.
Right, right, yeah, because that is true. Like the insurance in the medical industry, it's almost like this checks and balances. It provides almost a check and balance because there's always the conspiracy theorists. They'll say something like, "Oh, well, there's a cure for cancer, but there's too much money in treating
Uh-huh.
cancer." I said,
Yeah,
yes, but the insurance companies would say if there is a cure for cancer, they want it because they don't want to pay out for all the treatments
exactly.
involved. And so you think
Exactly.
about some of these tests that you'll get, and sometimes the insurance company rightly pushes back and says, "Hey, the hospital is like over. This is not a necessary test." Like I think one of the famous ones is when my daughter was sick. They do like a viral panel, and
Hmm.
the insurance company wouldn't cover it. And I was like, "Well, why?" And they were like, "Because it doesn't matter what virus you had. The treatment is the same."
Um,
That's only good for the CDC. They said we
gotcha.
cannot treat
Okay.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, if the CDC wants the data, they can pay for the test, or you can pay for the test if you want the data. But whether you have flu or you have COVID or you have RSV makes no difference to the course of treatment. And so I was like, that's kind of interesting. I was like,
Yeah.
you're kind of right. I was
That's
like, you
kind of a
kind of.
decent point. I can argue both sides on this. I gotta see your point. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, now if you did the strep test, that would have been covered because it would have ruled out the bacterial infection. I was like, but we didn't need to know the virus.
And this is where you're still what you were talking through right there is you're dealing with intermediaries, and
Yep.
intermediaries are good. I'm not going to say sit up here and say total decentralization and we're going to live on our own plots of land and nobody, I don't need anybody telling me anything. No, intermediaries are good for certain things, but at other times they're really not. And if we can build a system where we can evaluate an individual's credibility, and then the implications of that are the individual cares more about that credibility because there's direct compensation and reward for making that particular number about themselves go up, then I think you can see a path towards a lot of the systems we have today operating much more efficiently than they do. Which brings me back to like the point I always try to make, and whenever I'm talking to anyone, is that now more than ever, you matter if you do it right. If you structure your expertise correctly, you will matter more. But that's a big if. You have to do certain things. You have to remap where you exist in the world. You're not going to get the gold watch at the end of a 30-year career and you didn't do anything other than punch the clock in between. You really have to have varied experiences because the opportunity it sits at the intersection of a lot of different things. It's creativity. That's brownfield opportunities across industry segments. That's where human beings are going to be incredibly valuable. It's the last mile. It's that intuition. It's that judgment that, we just really haven't ever really directly rewarded until today.
I think making those comparisons too between like disparate disciplines, which is where like I always have, I think that my generation, because of 2008, we always kind of had this disappointment in college because it didn't really result in a job like our parents kind of wanted.
Hmm.
There
Yeah.
was a value to just getting varied knowledge across a bunch of disciplines and not necessarily the end goal being I'm going to specialize in this as a career. I'm just going to be more well-rounded as a person. The question is how much should that cost you? Totally
Yeah.
different scenario. Pay for
Yeah.
that the rest of your life, and that's a
Yeah. Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the idea of well-roundedness, because the models admittedly know a lot about a lot, but they're not necessarily going to draw the connections that you're going to draw. Like almost like you have a little bit of a bias in like the things that you studied and found interesting. You have a uniqueness to you. And the
Hmm.
model won't capture that uniqueness across tons and tons of individuals. And you kind of need that to push progress forward. And I love this, the kind of bringing it full circle. I love this idea that you will have you have your expertise is kind of codified, like you were talking about the intermediary. It's true, like I kind of just like only want to deal with the expert.
Hmm.
I don't want to
Hmm.
deal with all the externalities of the whole thing. I want to be able to just trust, like, hey, this person there is the person who's taking care of me. I think lawyers are probably in this space too, because man, talk about a variety of outcomes, right? Like, I
Hmm.
mean, with medical, it's like you're healed or you're not.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you're cured or you're not. That could be very binary. Law is something where you can't help but think, if I had a different lawyer, I wouldn't be behind bars right now. So, you know, I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
somebody's
yeah.
out there
And
thinking,
that's why they can command so much per hour because of the unknown, the ineffable quality of what if I had gone another direction, right? That drives out every service industry. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's very funny because I had this conversation with someone yesterday where I said, you know, I feel like accountants and lawyers may be the last ones that they were like, oh, well, they get how long before they get replaced by AI? I go, maybe never,
Hmm.
because I like, and doctors also, because I like I think humans in general like the idea that there's somebody to sue. There's some kind of an accountability. There's
Yeah,
some like, hey,
yeah,
you're gonna get a malpractice suit. We will disbar you if you mess up my case. If the AI messes up, it's kind of like, oops, we could put in
yeah,
an appeal. Would you like me to put
yeah.
in an appeal for your case now? Like, sorry, like is
There's a short argument and there's a more elegant argument, and I'm trying to think of like which one to go, because like I've speak to a lot of attorneys around this, because interesting, intellectual property attorneys are the only ones that know the organizations producing the intellectual property, because they're the ones that when they go and they have to defend or they have to be an advocate or they have to, whatever, they are the ones that are kind of traversing the stovepipes, the silos within an organization, and so they're very interesting to talk to. And the thing they repeatedly come back to is that this is all built on judgment, right? Like you produce I go and do a deposition, I produce an artifact, that artifact is filed. I'm the one that puts my name on the line, and I'm never going to trust a machine, right? And also, I make my money in 8-minute increments. Why the hell would I ever want a machine to do these things? So, like again, the elegant argument and then the simple argument. And like this kind of, in a roundabout way, comes back to what we were talking about of reveling in the arcane. Finance, law, these are systems that have been around for centuries now. And they operate a certain way because it's a hazing process to get to the top. And they, being insular, do not want to undermine themselves. Why in the hell would they ever adopt this technology whole cloth and take all of that infrastructure away? Right? Coding, coming back to it, coding, software engineers don't have that. Software engineers are a varied tapestry of individuals from individual backgrounds. You can't say that I'm a senior associate at XYZ code. Like that just doesn't really apply. It's an apples to oranges. And I think that's why you're seeing so much disruption is because of the lack of, as you put it, a union, if you will.
yeah.
And that's exactly what finance and law are. They're giant unions, and they're going to keep things the same because it's in their best interest.
And we're tinkerers by nature. Like I always
Exactly.
say, like I'm
Yeah.
always looking to make my stuff more efficient, and then like I can just decide not to bill by the hour, which is something that Justin and I kind of we were like leaning on that for a long time because it was a safer way to bill. People understood it, and then we were like, we're going to throw that out because now we have the ability to flat rate price, and we can take on deals based on kind of the value to the person, and the je ne sais quoi is figuring out what the value is to the person. Um,
Yeah.
you know, law account and accounting too. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
always talk about that. What if I'm wrong? If I fire my accountant and I go with the
Hmm.
AI, the cost to me could be so great to have to now
Severe.
do an
Yeah.
audit. It would be like, oh my, and so you're like, you know what? I want to at least know that my accountant has it, but they're also accountable that if we get audited, he's going to have to do that too. Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
that's, I mean, there are ways I mean, I can see systems where you build that, like AI does 90% of the work, but we're just basically the insurance policy on top of the AI. I can totally see that. I think the counter argument there is people still want a handshake, and maybe the cost of the handshake goes down. You're not doing the same rates. But then the opportunity is the other, what you would tell an accounting firm is do more business then. Same thing with law firms. And it's actually something that I say a lot because a lot of our business is a new approach to trade secrets. trade secrets to this point have been a cottage industry. Like I don't know how familiar you are with Carta, but Carta, they structured cap tables and they made cap tables
Mhm.
as easy as DocuSign, right?
Yep, yep.
Or Carta, you had an attorney sitting there, going, it's quite expensive to manage a cap table. That'll be $700 an hour, and I need at least 14 hours to do this. And now it's as simple as a click of a button. Trade secrets are where we think there's an opportunity as well. You can provide a lot of
Right.
structure there. And what I tell attorneys is certainly you're making so much money on reinterpreting and reconstructing this evidence trail when another party, the counterparty, is actively trying to obfuscate, right? Which makes for a lot of time and depositions and a lot of money spent to try to reconstruct. When we hand you a fully auditable evidence trail from the point of generation, the genesis of the idea, yes, the opportunity for you in terms of like money to be made collapses. But we've also given every company out there a opportunity to do more trade secrets, to structure more opportunities without having to go down the patent trail, which is crazy today. Like $100,000 to tell the world everything that you've just done, feed it into a model. Let's go around your patent. Like patents are, I don't know. I don't want to go down that direction. I think patents
Right, right.
have an expiration date at some point, likely if we're not, other than like printing chips and like making molecules bind. But I think coming back to it, trade secrets are a huge opportunity to help. It's an example to help a service industry make more money if they just get out of their own way.
Yeah, yeah, that's well,
Yeah,
that's what I would always thought. Like this should help
yeah,
my lawyer theoretically find more case that
exactly.
things that they
Yeah,
couldn't do by hand before. Finding some obscure case that helps support the scenario. Like, yeah, I want them to use the AI. I don't want to self defend. That's
yeah,
I think
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's the big tension right now in software engineering is are regular people going to take the software engineer's job? And I'd say, like, let's look at something like law. Are regular people going to start passing the bar and self-defending themselves? Let's say we decide we don't even need the bar anymore. It's like, yeah, forget the public defender. I'm just going. For me, I'm just like, I don't think so. I think that the same thing. I look at Squarespace. I go, there's entire agencies. As easy as people think Squarespace is, there's entire industries of agencies that build Squarespace sites for people because they just don't. If I like, my dad found Squarespace difficult, but he has
Yeah,
a business and he needs a
yeah,
website. And so I
yeah.
think about that with law too, which is maybe better attorneys are now available to folks that previously couldn't afford them.
And then do you see why expertise matters so much more? Because like if everyone is speaking the vocabulary, then everyone understands your utility if you do it right. Right. And that's
Yeah.
why I think Quadron is so valuable, irrespective of industry. Now, admittedly, I think software developers are going to come up with their own solutions. I think you actually just very much articulated the solution for software is that if everyone can do 80% of it, that 20% becomes incredibly valuable. And you're going to be doing it across a number of industries, or excuse me, a number of companies, and not just one company that's going to give you the gold watch. It's going to be uncomfortable for a while, but in the end, software developers become incredibly valuable if they do it right, you know?
Right. That's I think that people are looking at I think falsely people kind of look at the big layoffs and like the things that are going on at the big companies and they see that as like the end of the industry and I'm thinking like I never worked at any of those companies in my career. I know tons of engineers that never worked there. There's an entire industry of software developers that work on software systems for smaller businesses that are it's just very unknown, especially in the Silicon Valley. They kind of like live in this little like they live in this
Hmm.
weird kind of alter universe sometimes. I think they don't realize. I'm like, you realize how much like legacy software is out there that are like one of our
COBOL.
bigger customers. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, one of our
yeah, yeah.
bigger customers is an oil and gas company, and they're like they do local oil and gas, and they're not going anywhere. Oil and gas isn't going. Now, someone could come into me and say, "What isn't the whole world going solar?" And I was like, no, you know how expensive it is for me to replace the gas tank in my house, replace all the heat in my house, throw solar on my house, and then hope that like I'm going to make the break even 10 years. 10 years from now, it's not how regular people think. I'm like it could tell they've never sat. I said there wouldn't be so many door to door solar salesmen if it was so easy to just sell solar panels.
Yeah, I mean, hell, I didn't realize until I looked at my gas. I'm only renting my little gas tank out there, right? They'd have to
Oh
rip
yeah,
it out
yeah,
of the ground if I wanted to change. Didn't know that. That's some great. That's a business I want to get into. No, I think the gnashing of teeth and the anxiety. Anytime there's a life change, it's hard on people. But I think the fact of the matter is, a lot of people were making a lot of money doing not a lot, and that is probably something that is a very valley opinion, a valley perspective. That's the way the world should work. And I think, Mike, I think you're a kindred spirit. I think there's a whole lot more opportunity doing things that you actually want to do. I mean, there's a lot of like self growth and reflection and learning about yourself through figuring out what you are and are not good at. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to kind of take the bull by the horns a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Never been a better time to learn a lot about
Yeah.
law. Like that. That's the
Yeah.
that's the bit. And to be very entrepreneurial. The entrepreneurial kind of approach, I think, is going to be a lot more appealing. But this comes back to your point, right? The things that get me, the things that weigh on me at night now, because I have 3 kids and
Hmm.
the pension, the
Yeah.
401k, the
Oh, yeah.
things you're giving
Hmm.
up. Like what are where is the future there? Because companies used to provide a lot of security, and I feel like
Hmm.
now we're all going in the small business direction, which I love. But small businesses cannot. I mean, man, the benefits. When I worked at a bigger tech company, man, the benefits. Admittedly, the job is
Hmm.
way cushier than being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You get a lot
Yeah.
more downtime. Like,
Yeah.
let's be real, and you get insane benefits. I mean, I tell people, like, just the idea that you get 3 months severance. I said, do you
Hmm.
understand how difficult that is for a small, like, to be able to pay to be able to pay out a large portion of your staff for 3 months, just like to fire them, just to let
To
just
make
to
them
do a
go away.
layoff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
small businesses don't have 90 days cash in the bank for the staff they do have, no less
Right.
that. So it's a
Right.
very different. It's like a stratospheric difference in people's mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something that you can't scream at clouds in the sky. It's here to stay. That behavior from companies is here to stay. It's just a matter of what we do as human beings in response, And right now, there is going and finding another one, and you can work your tail off, and you as a W-2 employee in a right to work state can end up in the exact same position. And that uncertainty I think is very different from the experiences prior generations had. And I think that's new. And that is happening right at the time, arguably because of artificial intelligence. I think that's actually being used as pretext to do a lot of this activity. But that is actually the opportunity if we do it right. We just need the systems, and social totems just simply aren't going to provide the recognition or the compensation for reasons we discussed. We need new systems that allow us to speak with conviction about the things that we believe are valuable in our past, and then allows us to monetize them more effectively. It can't just be a YouTuber on social media or social media. It has to permeate the rest of the world, and we don't have those systems today.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree, and especially with a lot of us being self taught and kind of coming into this, you're in a prime spot, and it's going to be interesting to see this develop. I think over time, and what where do software engineers end up? How do we I think it's going to end up a lot less crazy than people think. To be honest, I
Yeah,
think we're in
I
like a
agree with
time
you.
of flux. So like
Yeah.
the other side of this is like going back to that Web3 convo, and we kind of alluded
Hmm.
to it, is we're one kind of event away from
Hmm.
a serious security. We haven't had it. We've sort of seen it start to
Yes.
happen, but there'll be a serious security thing where it's like, okay, we got to put the brakes on everything.
Yeah, and this is and I know we're talking software here, but if as markets unbundle and people start speculating in ways that they probably shouldn't, I think it's more than likely that we see exactly what you were describing, more people becoming proficient and just enough to do something damaging, right? And like that is where the huge opportunity for software developers exists, is the recognition by a vast number of individuals who are now playing with these tools that they can't do the last mile, right? I think it was like 95% of code is still generated by 5% of individuals on GitHub.
Yeah,
Um,
yep, yep.
yeah, something like that. And what happens when it's 30%? That number moves from 5% to 30%, and that new 25% is not incompetent, but just north, just slightly off, if you will. I think that means it's a huge opportunity. And I think luckily that CIOs also recognize that, increasingly recognize that. And there's a huge opportunity, I think, in the industry for everyone in the next couple of years as this levels itself out.
For sure, for sure. I mean, you can see it. I always point to the AI companies, like looking at their job boards. I said they're hiring more engineers than ever. So there's not like, there's clearly a benefit to it. I see a lot of new companies popping up. And Mark Andreessen kind of talked about this too, that actually the model companies are sort of in a race to the bottom. The rest, they're going to capture about 1% of the
Mhm.
total economy that this actually ends up producing for the rest of
We've
us.
seen we've seen this before. This is, I mean, hardware and then Microsoft created this whole new ecosystem in the application space. Like we have been here before. This isn't really that different. The difference is that it's a tool that provides value that we really can't price effectively today, and that is the deeper problem.
That's going to be very interesting. That I mean, listen, our pricing model changed
Yeah,
drastically, and I remember
yeah.
when it happened. I was like, I think that we can begin. Like things would come in, and I would take it very cautiously. I'd say to Justin, like, okay, we'll take this project. Just take the budget they have. I'll
Mhm.
build it so that if we can't go upside down on it, and I'll like
Yeah,
track my hours and just see what
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah,
ended
yeah.
up being. I'd be like, you know what, it works. It works. We're good. We still approach it with trepidation because I still, but I end up being the guinea pig for like, all right, well, let me try that project and I'll see how long it takes. And like,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
you still, what's happening with us is developers still want to get paid by the hour. We have a few developers that have wised up to
Right.
it, and
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
like, I want to do a flat rate. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm glad, because that just allows me as the business owner to keep the numbers and the margins perfect. But I want you to understand that you might go upside down. Like you might fly too close to the sun. And I just kind of accept that as an entrepreneur. Like I may fly too close to the sun. I'll make it right for my customer and turn it around. Prior to that, we took all the risk and we would be paying contractors for hours and hours and hours. And like
Yeah, 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 yeah,
you'd
yeah.
have, you'd have a project that went 2, 3, 4 months over. I mean, I've heard horror stories of projects going a year over time. You just don't have that. I mean, with AI, when I talk about overtime, it's like a few days over time, not
Yeah.
not like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's or we built the wrong thing, so we just got to point it in a different direction. And but the security, I definitely take a lot of time with the security. It's very cognitively exhausting. I
Hmm.
find the AI side of things, like, I think the lawyer would find the same exact thing. It's okay, now you got 50 cases you can review. The AI says these are good, but in order to go and present the one, you do have
Hmm.
to read it yourself to make sure that the AI
Yeah,
didn't just hallucinate it. So I end
yeah,
up in that same scenario. Like, all right, we're going to take in a social security number. It needs to be encrypted. I need to go check the data. I need to actually go and make sure that the person puts it in and it encrypted it, and it did the right thing with it and it did it in the right manner and I can't break it. Even if Claude tells me, no, no, I did it. Trust me, I did
yeah,
it. I still have
yeah,
to, as the person who's putting my name on it, has to do it. The person on Lovable may not even know
yeah.
that that's the
So,
thing.
so you're kind of touching on something I think is pretty cool, and I spend a lot of time on. So we built the systems. We know that you can use speculation to drive incentive structures. Creating markets, we think today is like a bookie down the street, and there's a game, and he's like, you know, take the other side, right? And that's actually not how markets operate at incredibly high frequency. You can use an agent properly parameterized to create markets on everything, you know? So you can create markets on Mike doing it the right way and not
Oh,
leaking a
very.
social security. And so like, no, I've explored, I've been exploring that. We've been exploring that. Like, where is the boundary? And I think it almost ends up moral. Like, where is the boundary for markets? And it's stuff that's on the moral side of it. But absent that, everything is a potential arrangement. And it's, we're theoretically an infinite asset class. That's one thing I've kind of like come to is that everything we do is a potential arrangement for speculation, which tells you who you actually are, if you do it at volume.
Very, very interesting. And so now, with your vouch framework, AI kind of helping you out, do you have the intent to do like a crypto also kind of scenario with that? Like this almost like a ledger of my progress, or something of that nature?
Yeah, it's an auditable record, and it's not, we're not using ZK proofs or anything like that. We're not trying to like reinvent the world. I don't think that's really necessary. I think it's inevitable that fully auditable ledgers are essential for doing the day-to-day activity of our lives to prove where we've actually been, right? You can call that surveillance. I call that just a more effective LinkedIn page, you know? And I think if you point it, again, coming back to incentives, if you point this at helping you tell a story that's grounded in your truth to help you become the best version, best marketable version of yourself, that's that's I think a hugely beneficial opportunity. Keeping in mind that things like patents, healthcare, HIPAA compliance, you need those anyway. You're going to need this process and policy about what happened where was the data munged, where did a human end and a machine began. Like those are all critical considerations for the world.
This is yeah, this is very true because this happens to me all the time when I get on a call with someone and they're like, "Have you worked in HIPAA compliant? You know, in a HIPAA, have you built a HIPAA compliant piece of software?" And you end up in this, you know, there's no way to prove it. All I can say is yes, I have, and this is what.
Yep.
But like, I
Yeah.
can't prove
Yeah.
it to you. You know, like, well,
Yeah.
let me use it, and I'm like, well, you'd have to go to a doctor at this hospital, and then like you'll get this app, that thing. That's the you know. But how do you know that exactly from a layperson? How do I prove that to a customer? I'm really relying on just traditional sales skills to be able to articulate where I've been and what I've done. And there are individuals who are great at that and individuals
Hmm.
who are not so great at that. And I think that
Yeah.
the ones who are not so great don't even realize they're not so great at it. They're not getting opportunities and don't understand it. So something like this kind of democratizes that, where it's like your greatness is
Yeah.
quantifiable.
It's it when you look deeply at the way the world works around us, and it's all prestige networks and gossip, and you realize that all of this sits on a firmament of an analog world, right? We're moving where we move slowly. I could call Mike's references. I could take my time, sit back, think big thoughts about Mike. Like that's not the world as it's going to be. There's just too much BS, too much noise. You got to be able to discern signal. Signal comes from an auditable record. It's our thesis that conviction is the most effective signal about how you actually feel and who you actually are. It's an incentives alignment problem.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, so I like this idea that your conviction, it is true, you know, and again, you'll get proven wrong, and it'll, but it is kind of when you think about like when you're willing to really put yourself out there, it's why social media has maybe worked so well, or somewhat well to this point, is the people with kind of some conviction, they get out there, they endure the criticism of their peers, and they
Yep.
fight back against that, and then we kind of all kind of discern who we think is right and who we think is wrong based on those debates.
In an analog world, that like the jurisprudence of the social world kind of works. You can have like somebody just trolling you, but you have a lot of people that are believing in your authenticity. At a machine speed, you need something that's far more effective. You know, you need something that works much more, not ruthlessly, but much more cleanly and efficiently on what actually matters for you. So we're not building a single market a single market of mic. We're gonna try to create thousands of arrangements, and so all of them are very low stakes. So you're not losing your entire life savings on anything, or not having your tokens lost on any particular thing. But there's just enough conviction in each one of them to get a sense for how you actually feel.
Very, very cool. I'm excited to see the V1, the beta. I really
Yeah,
want it
man.
because it's going to be exciting to see it come out and get out there. We're at about 57 minutes now, so at this sort of rounding third base, I like to end my calls or my podcast here with some questions. But one, I realize my first question is always about advice to young programmers, but I don't know if that would be your advice right now. I think because I get a fair amount of people, and I say young programmers, it's really people entering their career right now because it
Mhm.
is a very hard time for folks. It's the number one thing I get asked, so I always feel the need to kind of round it out with people who've been through a lot. What would your advice be to someone entering their career right now, programming or otherwise?
Yeah, programming is. I would actually lean into that one, Mike, for you, because
Yeah,
I
let's do
hang
it.
out. I hang out with a lot of programmers. I got a lot on my staff. I've spent my career with them. Programmers. Dunning-Kruger is a thing in any ecosystem. You think you know one thing, you think you know everything. I actually think in software development, it's much less than I've seen, say in law or finance. They're very introspective,
Mm-hmm.
individuals that are software programmers. Right now is probably the biggest sea change for the way software development takes place ever, right? There is a great opportunity for an individual further down the career path and an individual just beginning to work together to kind of make their way through it. So I think that's a long way of saying find a really good mentor. Find somebody that is introspective. Find somebody that could probably learn from a young programmer today. There's definitely things that a younger set does that my team could never do. They have 30, 40-year careers, but they don't have that like neural pliability that a
Yeah.
young person has. And I think that there's a lot kind of like the meeting, so like there's like this the circle and like you kind of like meeting from the other direction. So find a mentor, as I think it would be mutually beneficial.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that. The mentor and a mentee almost. Like,
Yeah,
find
exactly.
somebody to
Yeah,
mentor because
yeah,
you're right. You get a lot from that new way of thinking. And, I've seen that kind of at the companies we've worked at. People who've been in it 30 years, they sort of forget to keep
yeah,
learning. And so this is
exactly.
a way for you to continue because they'll come to you with things to try out. And then question number two is what any good books that you recommend that you're reading right now or otherwise that you would recommend to folks?
Yeah, it just came out, and that's a great question. Okay, I gotta turn airplane mode off real quick. Seven Rules of Trust, Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia. I think it
Okay.
came out in the last couple of months. Great book.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
Wikipedia is an amazing story too. I love that, like the way that he built that, the whole thing. That would be awesome. I'll definitely check that one out. And then final question is, where can people find you, follow you, learn more about Quadrant, be ready for it when it comes out, and out of
Yeah.
beta?
Yeah, so we're actually live at institutions right now. We've gone very hard on the enterprise side, so we're live there. Our kind of open public project, that is coming. It can be found at quadrant.tech. Sign up for the waitlist. I'm trying to talk to everyone that thinks they're an expert in something because
Okay.
we can make markets on anything, but we want to make markets that actually work for you. We want to understand and evaluate your expertise. So quadrant.tech, sign up for the waitlist. You can reach me Dan at quadron.io. I have a Substack. It's reproof, regarding proof, colon in the middle, reproof. Thought that was a little nifty. And I'm at Pratl Dan on X, trying to yell into the void.
Amazing, amazing. I too am yelling into the void on X. It's very,
Yeah,
hard to build those numbers, but love it, love it. And we'll link everything in the show notes for everybody who's watching. And Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Mike, I appreciate the opportunity, man. Great chat.